We all go through life searching to discover who we really are. When we look within, we gain perspective into who we really are. Who were our ancestors, those men and women upon whose shoulders we stand. Conversations on Race is a podcast that celebrates the inspirational voices of those who are on a journey towards self-discovery through dialogue, scholarly research, and education. Let's enjoy our uniqueness, make strengths of our weakness. Every episode of Conversations on Race will explore a true life story through the lens of a unique family history and questions about DNA, genealogy, census data, and oral history. Join us. Send us your questions. Post your comments on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Patti Maria McGee. The inspirational voices we hear on this journey called life. Conversations on Race with Patti Maria McGee, who we really are.
And I am here with my co-host, Dr. Noelle Mubaira. Hey, Doc. She's all the way in Wilmington, Delaware. She's also my beautiful cousin, and she is a UN Ambassador for Peace, among other things. Her book, Serving with Success, is available on bookpatch.com. And you can also send in a request to our website. There you go. And we can hook you up with that. Our co-host, our former San Francisco treat, who is now a Georgia peach, because she left us. She's all the way in hot Atlanta. Dr. Margaret Norris. How you doing, Dr. Norris?
I'm doing wonderfully well. Thank you. Thank you.
Glad you made it. Thank you for fitting us into your very busy schedule. Now, your book, My Beloved Journey, is doing well. It's available on Amazon. It's a story, an inspirational story about being a single mom of three amazing sons who are all taller than her.
Yeah.
And so we want you to be able to get Dr. Norris's book. You can write into the website or any of our social media. We can connect you. And our beautiful guest today, Marla Matime. She is a spiritual sister who is artistic, musical. She's a wife. She's a mom. She's a consultant. And we happen to have the pleasure of working together on a project, Goddesses in Government. She works for the League of California Cities Black Caucus. I work for the California State Legislative Black Caucus. We connected, and we've been able to do a couple projects together. Now, we want to get to know Marla a little more personally. Now, you said your husband is from France. Since this show is on race, are you in a biracial marriage? Are you just an international marriage? Tell us about that, and we want to know about that pandemic baby.
Oh, yes. Okay. So my husband is French. His parents are from the West Indies. His father's from Martinique and his mother's from Guadeloupe, and they met in Paris. And it's an international, multicultural relationship. He's a Black man, strong, powerful, and we met in Atlanta in 2006, and we lost contact, and then we reconnected in 2009 and decided, let's get married. And so in 2010, we got married. We have 3 children. We have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and tomorrow my pandemic baby will be 2. And it's been interesting because there is the cultural divide, but we have so many things in common in our shared experiences. There's things that he experienced only when he came to the United States. He didn't experience a lot of racism in France because the mentality was different there. That they had abolished slavery hundreds of years before the United States did. So by the time he was coming up in age, he didn't experience discrimination and racism like I did. I grew up in Arkansas, the deep South, and in the 2nd grade, actually, I was called the N-word on the playground by another student, my peer. And it's interesting because in 2022, you know, I think about, as I reflect back, if you would have asked me back in the 90s when I was in elementary school, junior high school, and coming into high school, where would we be today as a people in regards to race issues? I would have said, racism is going to be gone, long gone, because everyone is pretty much, we're a melting pot. The United States have always been a melting pot. And to have discrimination and race issues, even still to this day, is disheartening, because I think that our people can do better than what we're doing right now. Not just our people, but our white counterparts. My 3 children, my oldest is darker than me. My 2 youngest is the same complexion as me. And I wonder, what will they experience as they come up in school, just based on the color of their skin. And it's interesting, because if you talk to my husband, he'll tell you a totally different, give you a totally different synopsis, because the moment he opens his mouth and people recognize that he has a dialect, a different tongue, then they'll say, "Oh, where you're from? Where are you from?" And as soon as he says Paris, France, then it's automatically their guard is down. They treat him totally different than they would a Black African American man. And I think it's very interesting.
Right. That whole issue of, I had never heard of the paper bag test. I grew up in Los Angeles around all different types of people from all over the world my whole life. My
Mm-hmm.
father is light, bright, damn near white. My mother is dark, and I had somewhere in the middle. I have one sister who's light skinned, one sister who's dark skinned. And so that whole thing it was never part of my growing up
Mm-hmm.
until, like you go out into the world, and then, somebody calls you a name, or makes a comparison, and you're just left there with your jaw dropped. So it's really sad that people do that. Now, because our show is talking about race and talking about people's life experiences, one of the things that you mentioned, you talked about music and how music brings everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I hear loud rap music coming from a vehicle, I look in the vehicle and that person ain't black, 99.9% of the time. And then I was watching something on the internet, and Sandra Bullock, who we all know and love, was rapping Rapper's Delight. And she was on some British show, and
Mm-hmm.
all the British people in the audience were going hip hop, hippie to the hip. And I'm like, this music permeates everyone, everywhere, all over the
Mm-hmm.
world. And Dr. Norris and I used to work on the show Street Soldiers. And we used to have people call in, and people would talk about the destructive nature of lyrics in some of
Mm-hmm.
the music that our kids are being, brought up on. And, I think we all come from different eras. Dr. Norris and I both grew up in California, but we had a broad range of options in terms of art, music,
Mm-hmm.
culture, all of that kind of balance. What programs and services, as a representative that serves cities, are you seeing becoming more and more available for our young people as alternatives? Because, like you mentioned earlier, jobs, exposure, mentors, tutors are developing our next generation of
Mm-hmm.
leaders. What are you seeing out there in our cities when you're working with elected officials?
Our elected officials, I think, are doing the best that they can with what they are given. There's things that there are, even our African American elected officials are experiencing, obstacles and walls, even as elected officials. So I think that, to bridge that gap, if they're connecting with local organizations that are on the ground doing the work, then we can definitely have that camaraderie between our elected officials, the nonprofit organizations that serving the community, and ensuring that both are communicating with one another to tear down any obstacles and barriers that either side faces. Earlier, I mentioned a few organizations out here in the Inland Empire that I'm close with that are actually doing the work, and they are changing lives. They are empowering our young people to stay focused, to get their education. And if you don't want to get your education, you got to do something. And so they're mentoring them and helping them to ensure that they're closing the education gap and being a productive citizen of their community. A lot of them come back into the organization and pay it forward, for the next generation, to prevent those other young people to go down a wrong path. And I think our elected officials, if we see more of our Black and brown people in positions of decision-making power, then our young people will be inspired as well to go into civic engagement. And I think that's what's more important too, that civic engagement piece, because a lot of policies and laws and resolutions that are passed are on the local level, which affects us more every day than what's happening in DC. And if we're educating our people, our children, then they would aspire to come into those positions of power to make a positive change for their communities as well.
Now, most people think that our local politicians or our state politicians operate our local public schools, which is
Yeah.
a misunderstanding. And
Mhm.
I heard Dr. Norris say, the school to prison pipeline. I've actually worked in a prison. I worked in a maximum security prison for 3 years. I was a warden in training, and I could tell you it's the dropout of school to prison pipeline. The average inmate in California is between 33 and 35, but functions at a sixth grade level. So if you
Mm.
have a 35-year-old acting like a 12-year-old, it's no surprise that you wind up with a person who winds up in prison. But what we see are people that think they know it all by the time they get to high school.
Mhm.
I
But
worked with a bunch of kids in LA, and this one kid's, I said, well, what do you want to go when you go to school? He said, I'm going to prison when I grow up. Like, he
oh
was proud of
Lord,
it.
that's sad. Can I just say something about that? When we talked about the music piece, and now, talking about a child aspiring to go to prison, um, it's a product of their environment too.
Mhm.
So if they're angry, our young people are angry and they don't know how to express it other than to be destructive and to, you know, go into music and entertainment and spread that hurt and that pain. It's not hatred. It's you're hurting and you're in pain and you don't know how to express it. You don't know how to communicate because it was never taught to you. So I think if we have more programs that would offer them that outlet, that positive outlet, with someone who's like, no, you don't want to go down this wrong path. Like, to the young brother who want to go to prison, like, shake him and say, hey, that is not what you want to do. Here, let me show you over here how you can be productive and how it's going to benefit you. And I think it just takes that one person to plant a seed or to just embrace a child and say, hey, don't go down that road that I went down, or, stay away from this. Even though you're in that environment, let's get you out of it. Let's come over here and do something more productive that's going to prevent you from going down that route. And it's really sad that our most of our men who are in prison, they're in the 30s, between 30 and 40. That's a prime age range for them
Mhm.
to be somebody, for them to really make a positive impact in their community. And so it's disheartening, but back to what we said earlier, Dr. Norris, having the hope that we can come out as a people and we can rise to the occasion and take our power back. We can say, I'm not going to be subjected to what happened to my family. I'm going to be that generational curse breaker, and I'm going to come in and do what I'm supposed to do so that my children and their children, and if I don't have children, the people in my community, their children can benefit from what I'm doing. And I think we need more people like that to rise up to the occasion and make those positive changes.
I agree with everything that you've put forth. And having been in both the public school setting, the nonprofit sector, and also having done some work in the prison system, all the way from juvenile justice through maximum security, adult maximum security penitentiaries. What's ringing in my head right now is that we constantly hear about systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
And while I definitely agree that one person can make a difference, I also know the importance of putting pillars, policies, and practice into place.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can tear down systemic racism by building programs that work, but connecting. One of the problems that I saw as an educational administrator was the resistance that school systems have to receiving the services of community-based organizations, of nonprofits. And it almost forces the nonprofits to work in silos.
Mm-hmm.
And they're between just simply them being seen as a threat, all the way to the standards-based curriculum that we have, where there's testing, and there's never any time to really serve the children.
Mm-hmm.
We continue to have this chasm. So I want to build structures of support. How do we go about doing that so that, number one, these programs that you've identified can reach a greater population,
Mm-hmm.
can be maintained and sustained, and can work in concert with the general population? And I hate using that term, but you know what? The general population is in the public school.
Mm-hmm.
Guess where else the general population is? In the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to change that somehow. How do we go about doing that? Of course, you have all the answers. I already said you're Dr. Marla.
Oh, I don't have all the answers. I appreciate that, though. You made a very great point in having pillars, and I look at some of the organizations that are working in silos, and a lot of it is because of community leaders that would say, I want to work with them, but I don't want to work with them. And so it creates a divide, and it creates, these cliquish systems. And it's like, no, we're not in competition with one another. There are power in numbers, and it's not about your ego, and I was talking with someone last week, actually, and there's this fine line between passion and ego. And a lot of people do things and they're like, I'm passionate, but it's really their ego because they're seeking certain things externally to validate that their passion is working for them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if we say, you know what, all the people who have some form of influence in our communities, if we could just get together and hash anything that is, outlandish in the sense of, who did what, we could get more done and create those pillars. Mm-hmm. We could get more done to build the structure of our community. That way it can withstand any opposition from any outside, influences. And another thing I wanted to bring up was one of the things that we did with the African American Caucus was partner with Mapping Black California. And during the 2020 incident with George Floyd, a lot of municipalities and local cities and counties were declaring racism as a public health crisis. Mm-hmm. And so what Mapping Black California did was they mapped the cities, the municipalities, and the counties that passed resolutions or proclamations declaring racism as a public health crisis. And they tracked, okay, did they implement something to hold their local government accountable if there's any situation that would go against what they said that they're going to do?
Mhm.
And there's many of them that just jumped on the train and was like, yeah, we're going to declare racism as a public health crisis, but they didn't put anything in place to combat it. They didn't create a diversity and equity and inclusion workflow process that would address it. Because a lot of them, it's like, oh, I'm just going to do this because everybody else is doing it. No, we need to hold them accountable. And
Absolutely.
I think we need to hold our local influencers and our community leaders accountable too. Like, if you say you're for the community, let's get together and let's whatever disagreements we have, hash it so that we can empower our youth and they can see that, okay, there may have been some conflict, but as mature humans, we overcame the conflict so that we could provide a better generation for our community.
Yes.
And I
And
think
we've got to
that's what's
empower
important.
ourselves and get out there and vote. You know, I'm seeing, all of us being politically active and really looking at who it is that we're putting into these positions and holding, whether it is your councilman or councilwoman, your local representatives, your state reps, whoever it is, we have to hold them accountable, just like we have to hold our nonprofits accountable, and understand that a lot of the quibbling and the gesturing actually also deals with who's getting funded and people thinking they have to compete for monies and things of this nature. But we all got to get out to vote too. May 24th is, we got to really push that.
Out here, I believe it's June 8th. Am I correct, Patty?
7th.
June
It's June
7th?
7th.
Okay. Yeah, out here, May
our
24th.
primaries.
Yesterday was the last day for early voting in Georgia. So
Yeah,
Dr.
absolutely.
Marla,
Yeah, well, we're saying a lot of things that are societal, systemic issues, but the support structures that Dr. Norris talked about, some of the most rewarding work I've ever done has been mentoring, so to speak, in one way or another, from Camden, New Jersey, just one of the poorest cities in the nation still to this day. And there was funding for an after-school mentoring of the young ladies that were maybe 6th to 12th grade. And I would talk to them. We would do some dance performance as well. And I would talk to them about their aspirations and what they saw themselves, where they saw themselves in 5 years. And like you said, the young man said he wants to go to jail. These young ladies want to be mothers, not talking about being married, not having accomplished anything except, having an offspring, and just getting into the systems that support mental health and support the addressing the trauma that young men and women are experiencing. The anger is coming out somewhere. It's not. It's just not in a vacuum. It's out of trauma. It's out of, and racism being a public health crisis is because of the trauma that it creates.
Yes.
Have you in your consultancy seen any success with mentoring types of work?
Yeah, there's plenty of organizations out in the IE that are mentoring, and they're doing great work out here. There's another organization called the Coma Unity Center. They also have a community garden. A lot of things that our people are doing, who, when they start an organization, they're wanting to heal our people. Healing has to take place first. Gardening is therapeutic, music is therapeutic, meditation and yoga and Pilates, those things are therapeutic and healing to the soul. And I think that if we really just look at each other and appreciate the gifts and talents that each other has, then we can acknowledge, okay, who are the mentors? Who has a significant gift that could come into a young person's life and tutor them in their English subject or their math subject and can empower them to do great work. You know, I do believe in the philosophy of each one teach one, because you can make a greater impact in the life of one person than trying to reach a million people, and you only have a percentage of those that would actually follow you and take heed to the advice that you give them. So I think that mentoring, it comes in different shapes and forms. It's not necessarily sitting down with them either and just working with homework. It's, hey, let me take you to the mall and show you how to dress for an interview. Let's go on a date and let me show you how to treat a young man or a young woman with respect and dignity. I think we have a lot of work to do, but there's many people out there that are doing great work. It's just we need to highlight that. We need to uplift that. And I think that would overshadow all the negative stuff that's happening. And then the younger people would be like, okay, I see what's going on. I want to be a part of that because they're doing good. I want to feel good. I want to look good. And I also feel that it's a mentality thing. Poverty is a mental thing too, you know, because if you think you're poor, you're going to be right. You're poor. But if you think that you're rich and you have the resources that you need to succeed, then those opportunities will come to you. Those resources will come to you. I like to listen to this young lady. I discovered her during the pandemic. She's an artist by the name of Tony Jones. And I talk about her in my newsletter a lot because when I'm down and when I feel like I need some uplifting and I can't think of the words myself, I'll go to her affirmations for the grown ass woman. If I can cuss on here, I'm sorry. But in one of her songs, she says, I'm a human being, not a human doing. And I think that when you're operating in your gift, you're being who you are. It doesn't feel like work if you love what you do. And so when we are fully present, then we can make a greater impact in the lives of others.
Well, we are running out of time. It has been a pleasure to have you, Marla. Thank you to our co-hosts, Noelle and Margaret, for joining us. We brought up some excellent points. I hope we get a chance to talk to you again. On the way out, can you give the audience your information regarding your newsletter, your social media platforms, and how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, so my consultancy is Marm Artistry and Consulting. You can find me on Facebook at Marm. It's MAR.M Artistry and Consulting. And then if you want to tune into the podcast, The Meta Spiritualist, it's The Meta Spiritualist on Facebook and on Instagram. And on Twitter, it's Metaspiritu1. So METASPIRTU1.
Can you type it in the chat for us real quick as we
Yes,
sign out?
yes, I will. And and also, I just want to say thank you, ladies, so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to see your beautiful faces and be surrounded by intelligent women. You all are just amazing. And I want to read your books. So if I can know how to get those, I will definitely take a look.
Well, you and I are going to be connected from now on. I mean, we've been working together since March, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to help make some change. Thank you all for joining us on Conversations on Race with Marla Matime, with our co-host, Dr. Noelle Mubaira and Dr. Margaret Norris. I'm Patti Maria McGee, signing out. Until next time, thank you for joining us.